Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we'll move on to the approval of the committee minutes dated July 12th, 2022. If there aren't any corrections or changes, do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Loop, support by Commissioner Joliet. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes approved. Next up, we'll move on down to the approval of our agenda. If there aren't any additional changes or corrections to the agenda, do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Joliet, support by Commissioner Lubes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Agenda approved. Next up, we'll move on to our first public comment. As a reminder, this is for items that are related to the agenda. So at this time, if there's anyone from the public who would like to join, please make your way to the head of the table. Good morning.
Good morning. Ross Baranco, Novi. Item 8B, the Oakland County Land Bank. It's been a week now that I've sent out an email to each of the commissioner members and a certified letter to the Board of Commissioners requesting a citing of the authority of this commission to create a land bank. I see here you have the purpose of the county authority. The county shall carry out the powers and duties and functions and responsibilities and authority under the Land Bank Act. So it's citing under which the powers of the state are, but I've never received any answer on to where is the power of the commission to create a county land bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, I will close our first public comment. Next up, we'll move on to item number 7, which is communications. We do have one item. It's item A, grant application, SEMCOG Planning Assistance Program Application, 9 Mile Corridor and Pathway Study. At this time, Amy, can we bring you to the table just to give us a little insight? There was a little bump in the road with this item. Fortunately, it is a bump that we don't have control over. So I'm going to have Amy give us a little insight and update.
So this is a grant under $50,000, which is why it's under communications. Normally, even in this instance, we would collect the grant at, I'm blanking on the name of the document now. The
Review form?
Yes, the grant review form. With the implementation of Workday, there's been an issue getting the vendor inserted into Workday, so we do not have that form, but it did go through the approval process and was signed off by the departments, and you should see the award itself at the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. Commissioners, is there any questions or comments in regards to this communication item? Alrighty. Seeing none, we do
You know, first and second.
perfect. Do we have a motion to receive and file this item? Motion by Commissioner Loops, support by Commissioner Jackson. Do we do prompt? No, we don't do prompt the vote. Or
We can do it either way.
we do roll call?
Yeah, I can
Or prompt the vote? Prompt the vote, please. Thank you.
Yeah, 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Communications has been filed. Next up, we'll move on down to our regular agenda. We'll start off with item number A, which is the Clerk Register of Deeds grant application with the Michigan Department of State Bureau of Elections for the 2022 Election Security Grant. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Jackson, support by Commissioner Lubes. And good morning, Mr. Roselle.
Good morning. How are you?
We are doing great.
This is a grant application with the Michigan Department of State for election security related requests. I'm pleased to let you know that a lot of things that are covered in this grant, the county has already went ahead and done in advance of the November 2020 election. So a lot of these things like alarm systems on our election tabulation room, security cameras in the elections division and in the tabulation room. We went ahead and did all of that in advance of November 2020. But we now have an opportunity to do some additional things with this grant funding, which we do plan on moving forward with. Some additional equipment, the county's AV counting board, which is a huge success. We just picked up Orion Township and added them to the list of communities that we serve. And through a partnership with our sheriff, we will be using sheriff's deputies to guard those ballots as they're being transported to the county's AV board and then guarded overnight until the AV board convenes the next morning. So some of it will be reimbursing some costs incurred from the sheriff's office for those expenses. But the total amount that we're applying for is $76,650, which is the maximum that we can request based on the number of precincts that we have in the county.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mr. Rosell. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments in regards to this item? All righty. Seeing none, please prompt the vote. I am a yes.
Yeah, 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rosell.
Thank you very much.
All right, hang on. Let's see what's going on. Next up on our agenda is item B, which is the Board of Commissioners, the Oakland County Land Bank Authority appointments. Thank you. As we can recall, Commissioners, during our last meeting, we talked about how the application for the Oakland County Land Bank Authority was opened, and it had closed on Friday, July 21st of 2022. It looks like we have a total of 3 applicants under the city official, 1 applicant under the township/village official, and then we have
11?
Yes, 11 under the general public. And as a reminder, we are looking to fill 1 seat within each of these categories. I want to give staff a big gracious thank you for making sure that we had these applications all ready and available for us to review on Friday. So at this time, Commissioners, my goal for today's meeting is to go through and take a look at the applicants and take a look at how many individuals we'd like to bring forward to interview during our next Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee meeting. So at this time, I think maybe one of the easiest ways to do this is to start off with a city official. Commissioner Gershenson.
Okay, so on the city official, on my paperwork, Eric Tungate's application was not complete. But I didn't know if that was just my computer or if anybody else experienced that.
Is there a specific area on the application that you noted that was incomplete?
Well, I mean, for instance, there wasn't a phone number. I would have called them and said, is there an error here? There was an email, but, so, maybe primary phone, 248.
You're right, I do see only the 248.
And so to me, someone that, and there's no references, to me, someone who didn't fill out the application properly should not be considered. I mean, I actually would have called him, I would have called him, and his email is here, but, so.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's good to get a little bit of insight from staff. Do we know if he did, in fact, submit that information, and we just maybe had an oversight of getting that information? I'd hate to disqualify a candidate for an incomplete application if there was a little error on our end. So
Right.
let's get some clarification.
I did open up the application that I downloaded from, just verify the email. does appear he just typed in 248 and not the phone number.
Well, and it wasn't just that, it was the no references.
Yeah.
Can we get some clarification on that, just to make sure?
And I'm fine with that.
No references.
No references. Okay. Commissioner Gershenson, that was a really great find. So, committee members, are we in an agreement of moving forward with the first two of reviewing the city officials, given that that third applicant has left out some pretty critical and crucial information within his application?
Are you making a motion, or we just?
Well, first, open it up for discussion.
I agree. I think that, since it's not complete and we're not voting to extend the deadline or anything today, that we should go with the more complete application.
Sure. So do we need a motion?
It's up to you. I mean, you can just make a statement, you can make a motion if you want.
Okay.
If you make a statement, we'll report it in a minute.
So let's just make this statement, given that the third applicant, Eric Tungate, did submit an incomplete application. This committee is choosing to disregard his application, given that it is incomplete. Commissioner Loops.
I'm especially pleased to see Drew Benson on our list that we're able to interview. I have personal knowledge of Drew as he worked for both Clawson and Troy cities that I represent, so I think he's a good candidate.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gershenson.
And I saw that, so I wanted you to speak on that, because both of the two candidates that are left are good.
Mhm.
And I believe that, is it Commissioner, Commissioner Powell is listed as a reference on Kilfani Stevens' application. So, I mean, I am leaning towards one. I could make a recommendation, but I want to hear what everybody else feels.
Are we interviewing
Are we
people
picking
or
interviews? So that
going
is,
off
that's
their
actually one of the
applications?
questions that we as the committee can make the decision on. Do we want to move forward and interview both individuals? Or is there a consensus of one individual underneath that section? Commissioner Loops, followed by Commissioner Jackson.
Since that's our policy to interview, I'd like to interview unless there's a time
Agreed.
restraint or something unusual that.
I agree.
don't know.
I think it would be wise to move forward with interviewing both individuals under the city official seat. Commissioner Jackson?
I just was gonna say the same thing. I know Commissioner Lewis has voiced favorability for Drew, but I have experience working with Calfani Stevens. He's one of our head officers at OSA, as well as the current deputy mayor, as you saw, Pontiac, where a lot of the properties preside. So I think that he would be an excellent candidate for this position. He also worked with Farmington Hills. I kind of looked at the cities that Drew worked for. Wixom, I think I saw Wixom, Troy, and Clawson. And I just, I don't know, my personal feeling is that the land bank and the properties that are really going to be part of these programs more so exist in the city of Pontiac, and there's more of a pertinence for his to be our choice.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gershenson.
So I just wanted to add to the discussion, and particularly related to that point, Commissioner Jackson, is that I would be looking for candidates outside the zone where the properties are, so that there isn't any conflict in their representing a community they either live, work, or in, and that's where a big portion of the properties are. So in going through the bigger list of the 11, one of my eliminating points, because it was hard, the 11 were so strong, was that if they lived in an area where I thought there were a lot of properties, I thought that could be a potential conflict. So I'm just putting it out there. I absolutely support interviewing both of them, but that is a criteria I use in eliminating people.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I do think, from the consensus that I've just heard, we will move forward with interviewing both of those individuals, Drew Benson, and is it Kalfani? Stevens, under the city official applicant seat. So then, next up, Commissioners, looking at the township official, given that there was one individual who applied for this, I do believe it's wise to still move forward, bring this individual forward in interviewing as well. Is there any objections to interview Jeffrey Campbell under the township/village official seat? All right. Commissioner Gershenson.
No objection, and I've heard really a lot of very positive things about this candidate.
Excellent, thank you. Next up, we'll move on down to the general public seat. As Commissioner Gershenson pointed out, we did get 11 applicants. Commissioners, I guess one of the things that we, as we do go through and have some discussion on the individuals, how many of the general public applicants do we want to bring forward to interview? My recommendation is about 4 or 5, given that we have such a large list of general public applicants. Thoughts, Commissioner Lutz?
Let's do 4.
4?
We're already doing 3.
Okay.
I'll support that.
So with that being said, Commissioners, does anybody want to bring forward any names that they saw that were Commissioner Gershenson?
So, again, there were so many good candidates. I was just shocked, and I thought, okay, how am I going to make an unbiased, objective choice here? So I started going through all the applications, and I started a list of what would disqualify. What did someone have that someone else didn't have?
Sure.
And for me, I eliminated the candidates that had worked in the Wayne County Land Bank. I found that, to me, that was a little bit of a conflict. So I eliminated those. I wanted somebody that had experience in government, but also I thought experience in real estate was very important, and not every candidate had experience in real estate. Actually, only one candidate for me had real estate and government experience, and was very well respected in the community. But before I put that name forward, I just wanted to explain how I had eliminated certain candidates. So I don't know what everybody else is thinking about certain candidates.
The one criteria that you mentioned in the beginning was taking a look at the Wayne County. That was something that I did feel that there could potentially be an area of conflict, so I did choose to look outside of that across all the applicants as well.
So should we pull those so everybody knows which ones we're pulling, or,
Do you want to state the,
well, how does everybody else feel about that?
I agree with you. And I was looking for real estate experience and also against the nothing against Wayne County, but a conflict of interest.
So that was Darrell Earl. John or Jake Purcell. Colin Roach. Those, I think those were the 3.
oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Loops?
I'm open to interviewing. I saw the names Jeff Campbell and Kathleen Duffy. I don't have personal knowledge of either or. However, Jeff Campbell works for the city of Hazel Park, and I've worked with Hazel Park extensively in the past. And they have a good reputation, which is why I was looking at his application. And then Kathleen Duffy is a planner, and at times I'm in awe of planners and their expertise and knowledge, so that's why I chose her.
Okay, that's something I'm looking at.
So Commissioner Loops, this is a point of clarification. The first individual that you mentioned, Jeffrey Campbell, so he is the applicant under the township.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to separate that.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
That's what we were
So are
talking
you
about.
putting, well, we've moved on to the general public.
Mhm.
So are you putting forth Kathleen Duffy's name?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes. I, too, Kathleen Duffy's application definitely popped out with her experience with urban planning. It definitely appears that she has some really great experiences, and I would like to bring her forward to interview as well.
I would too.
Commissioner Jackson.
I would like to bring forth Margaret Brown with her legal experience and her having leadership roles in the community housing network and real estate experience. She has worked and served in the housing sector for over like 21 years in different capacities in leadership roles. So I would like to bring her forward for an interview.
Okay, so we've got Margaret Brown added. Commissioner Joliet.
I was looking at George, if I pronounce this right, Levine's. He has real estate background and appraisals, and especially in foreclosure, which seemed interesting to me that because that's the depressed property that we're looking at, and home inspection also.
Okay, great. So we've got George Levine as another individual. Commissioner Gershenson.
So I'd like to put forth Martin Manna. He is the only candidate to me that has government experience, real estate experience, direct. He owns property, so maybe I should have clarified. Because George Levine, who I have no problem interviewing, I found some of his references a little questionable, anonymous investigations, and he has no government experience.
True.
I did question that one using, I don't know what that means, if that's private detectives or, I don't know what that means, but I thought that was a little strange.
Perhaps we could ask.
Yeah. So I'd like to put forth Martin Manna.
All right, so at this time, Commissioners, we have identified 4 individuals. I do just want to, any
Five.
thoughts on, I'm sorry?
5 names were brought.
Well,
Forward.
Thompson or Campbell is under the
Township.
township, who
I'm
was already.
sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
all right.
Okay.
Any thoughts on I believe it's the 6th, though, Adam Asif? I don't want to say his name incorrectly. Adam O.
I liked him. He didn't have any government experience. He was in sales in real estate. He wasn't an owner of a property. He does have land use experience. So, I mean, I liked him. I would put him in the 2nd category, but
Okay.
I also wanted to address Mark Craig.
Sure.
Because he's a natural. He lives and breathes this, but I felt it would be a conflict for us. So I excluded Mark with a heavy heart, because I do know what an unbelievable, committed individual he is, but I just thought it was just too close a tie to us.
I agree, Commissioner. Well spoken and well said. Well said. Commissioners, any other thoughts under the general public applicants? I do think it's important that as we do move forward with interviewing, that we do take a look at and really think about that conflict of interest component. And I'm glad that it sounds like as we did come to the table in reviewing these, that was something that we all tend to agree that is a really big component as we do look at fulfilling these seats.
Did anybody have any comments on Brian Rich?
Let's take a look. Getting a little lag. He's on page 50. So I do know with this individual, the one thing that did jump out was one of the references was an individual on the Wayne County Land Bank. Again, doesn't necessarily mean that is a direct relation to his own experiences, but I do want to just point that out, given the discussion that we had just had previously, talking about trying to stay away from the Wayne County Land Bank applicants' experiences, and now with this particular one references. And I don't know how other committee members feel, but I just wanted to bring that up to light, given we did talk about that. He's got great experiences.
What was the deadline date again?
Deadline date was the 21st, so Friday the,
No, I mean for us to make a decision.
so we had 30 days from,
From execution.
I'm sorry,
From execution.
what would be considered execution? Would that be at our last committee?
No.
Answers over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Hi.
Didn't even see you over there, I apologize.
Could you come up to a microphone, please?
So Commissioner Gershenson, can you restate the question?
Yeah, what is the date that we have to submit names?
Yeah, so, I mean, we're working on the calendar that we work through with the staff, which basically would have your next meeting, which I think is like mid-August, where you would interview candidates, make recommendations to the board, and then the board at the meeting on, I think, the 22nd, would make the official appointments, and that's the timeline that we're operating
Well,
on.
so our next meeting is August 9th.
Yeah, so that would be when the interviews would be. And then you would make a recommendation to the full board, and the full board would make the official appointments that next
On the 17th.
17th. There it
And
is.
that fits the
That fits the criteria,
Well, that's
correct.
better than I thought. That gives us a little bit of breathing room because we've got, what, 2, 3, 7 candidates to interview.
Correct. And we also have the opportunity to do a special LAGO meeting prior to the board on the 17th, if need be.
Okay.
So I'm happy to hear that the timeline does fit.
Yes.
Presently, we're not looking at potentially an extension.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We work closely with the board and, the board staff and really appreciate the collaboration.
Well, so on the 9th, let's say one of our candidates can't make it. I'd like to have an alternate date.
Sure.
For interviews, that somewhat depends on our agenda on the 9th, too. Do you think it's wise to do it on the day of a committee? And Penny, you're the one that we bump up against your committee. So there's no way we're gonna get 7 interviews in by 11 o'clock for your committee on the 9th.
So,
If you do 15 minutes per person, it's almost 2 hours.
well, typically we've done like 7 to 10 minutes, I believe, has been like the max. We try to stick to that 5 to 7, but I do know the leeway from anywhere from 5 to 10, but the ideal is to stick with the 5 to 7. What I do know as well is I know that working behind the scenes with staff on really coming up with maybe like 4 or 5 solid questions. So each of us will be able to ask one question that'll be the same question that will be asked to all applicants. And obviously there are some outlier opportunities to ask additional questions. But one of the things I think is going to be important is on our end to make sure that we're maintaining very specific, similar questions for all applicants. Again, trying to stick with that 5 to 7. We also have some opportunities to start the LAGO committee earlier. Right now, obviously, we start at 9:30. We could take a look at starting at 8:45. That stands with similar practices that we've done in the past with some timeline concerns. But Commissioner Gershenson, I love the idea of also having an alternate date, because I do think it is important that the individuals that we would like to bring forward in interviewing, that they do have that opportunity. If the 9th does not work, I wholeheartedly agree that we should have an alternate date put in place.
And are we talking virtual or in person?
I would like to do in person.
I would like to do in person too.
I think, and I would too, but I think virtually it would help speed the time if we're really trying to adhere to a certain amount of time. So we need to consider that.
Sure.
I agree. I would like to do in person, but for practicality and expediency, I think the Zoom does work, or
Yeah.
Microsoft
Do
Teams,
you
whatever.
want to give people an option, or do you think that defeats the purpose of it moving quickly?
Yes.
I think it kind of defeats the purpose of, yeah.
Kind of
Okay, my hesitancy in all of these kind of interviews is that people interview different than they are in person, and also that they work with a group. You know, you can interview a great candidate, but then they get into a group dynamic and they're not good.
Mhm.
So that's one of my reasons for liking an in-person, even though it's certainly not perfect. I've made lots of mistakes and choices when we appoint somebody to a committee and the committee's like, oh my God. So,
I think as much as I hear the virtual component, I also think there are some things that we could do on our end to help assist with the timeliness. So if that means that we have to start at 8:30, and if we could do 8:30, call the meeting at 8:30, and that way have some extra time as we do lead into, not butting into the next committee meeting, but I definitely find value, as Commissioner Gershenson pointed out, that we sometimes just see a little bit more in regards to the candidates when we do have in-person interviews. I agree, though, on the other end from the time constraints, but I do think that potentially we do have some control over increasing the amount of time we do have. It's just going to be at the expense of starting committee a little earlier. Thoughts, commissioners, staff, any suggestions? I know, Ms. Pam, this is your area of expertise, it appears, as we go through these appointments. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's preferable if they're here live, we can kind of assist them as they come in. We will work through, if we do want virtual, if that ends up happening, or the availability, when I call them, that, we can work through that. I can communicate with you as to what, maybe everybody can be here in person. So I'm getting the impression that I should, impose on them that, be
It's
here in
timely.
person, that's our first option. And then
Sure.
if something happens where they can't be in person, but they can be here virtually, I can communicate that with you and decide, how you want to handle it.
and maybe you could stress the time, that we're on a tight time, and give them your cell phone or someone's cell phone if they're gonna be hung up, that we're gonna just keep moving.
Yep. And what I usually do is, once you determine your time frame for each one, I will actually give them a time frame to choose, and then that's how I fill in the slots. So I communicate very well with them that it's only gonna be like a 10-minute interview, you know, and that we're on a time schedule.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, so how would we like to proceed as we move forward with interviews
In terms of format,
in terms of format?
start at 8:30 and do the candidates live, yeah.
Okay, so our first, Commissioner Jackson?
One thing about the scripted questions, we're gonna get one question to pose a piece. I don't remember us having scripted questions in all of the interviews that we've had thus far, so that probably should help us, remain on a tight time frame.
Agreed,
If we
agreed. Right.
commit to it. So,
Agreed.
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I've worked with the treasurer's office, and I do have a list of some questions to help you guys.
I love it. Thank you.
Great, that's exciting.
So I
so
agree,
with
I think
that
that's
being
gonna
said, I
help.
think face-to-face would be, I think it could work. If we start early, and we have scripted questions, we can maintain the time, right? And it'd probably be easier on staff, too.
And again, so when we do think about other Lago business that'll take place on the 7th as well, we do again.
On the 9th.
On the 9th, thank you, Commissioner. On the 9th, we do have some wiggle room leading into potentially calling that special Lago meeting before the board meeting. At this time, from what I see on Civic Clerk with pending information and meetings, I know it could change leading, but do we have any insight on, it is a heavier agenda on the 9th?
Aaron's got it pulled up.
You've currently got 4 items and then the legislative update.
So maybe we'll move, definitely we can postpone the legislative update. I think
Right.
that's gonna be a first and foremost. I do know that there's a parks item that potentially could,
Yep, and then you have an ARPA item, you have
is that Mr. Wybert's?
the Parks ARPA item, I'm sorry, yeah, same thing, and a CBA.
ZBA, zoning?
C-
CBA.
Collective bargaining.
Oh. Well, are you picturing a long discussion on?
It doesn't appear, I don't think so, but you never know. But I do think that we have a little cushion.
And I will note that today is the cutoff day for submissions for items, so there could be more items that come in throughout the day
Sure.
today. But
Sure.
as of right now, you have four items, and then we'll.
And two, Commissioners, one of the things, if we do get any additional items, we could maybe potentially take a look if there's some wiggle room of postponing until our next LAGO meeting. But I also will err on, there's always an opportunity to pull a special LAGO meeting before our board meeting, and that's for any applicant reasons or other business reasons. Commissioner Gershenson.
So, Commissioner Lubes, do you have any interest in pushing your meeting up from 11 to maybe 11:30, or do you feel confident?
I'm comfortable that if we start earlier,
Okay.
we'll be able to complete it. We've done this before.
Okay, and then let's pick our second choice, because it's a busy week. We've got, on the 10th, we've got finance and budget, a potential transit meeting. I don't know, is that going to be confirmed or anything?
It's also the beginning of budget hearings that week.
Right.
So what if we looked at doing either the 12th
The 12th works for me.
or the 16th? I know that the 16th leads into the board meeting on the next day, but I think that given the calendar that we do have with budget hearings, it does look like Friday the 12th is a lighter day. And in fact, I don't see any budget hearings on Friday.
Right. Does that work?
I'm not available, I've got a chamber outing,
Okay.
but
Because the 16th, budget hearings start at 1. I know I have a 9 o'clock. That I could try and change, but,
I have a 10 to 12 meeting on the 16th.
So
well,
maybe
the
we
morning
could
of the
look at,
17th? Is that too close?
I think that's gonna probably be too close. between now Friday the 12th, knowing that Commissioner Joliet may not be available for that time, or
Would you be, you wouldn't be available to listen or watch?
No, it's the Waterford golf outing, chamber golf outing, so I'm
You're gone.
gone.
So, with you saying that, Commissioner Gershenson, we could attend virtually? You said listen or watch, so we wouldn't be able to vote.
You
We
could
wouldn't be able to
vote,
be
but
part
we-
of the decision.
Well, you could make a,
we could make a recommendation, have a special LAGO meeting to bring forward where all members would be available and present to vote
In
on the
person.
recommendation of the individual. But as far as taking a vote,
yeah, we couldn't
can't
take
I
a
do
vote.
not believe we have then enough members. So a vote would have to take place during a special LAGO meeting before.
So what we're discussing now is if we have to extend the interviews?
If we need
So the
an
alternate date.
Oh,
So ideally, we'd like to bring all applicants forward to interview on Tuesday, August 9th. If there is a conflict in the time and date for applicants, that's when we wanted to take a look at, do we have an alternate date to allow an interview to take place?
So it wouldn't be a lot. We're hoping for the 9th, but you would also be able to watch.
I could listen.
You could listen,
while
but
I'm-
you could, if they're taped, I don't know if they're taped.
I know,
You
oh,
could-
you're right, I could view it
watch.
later. You're right, I could
And
view it
then-
later if it's recorded.
Point of but going off of the practices that we've done in the
Right,
past in this
true.
committee, what we typically do is to preserve, obviously, the confidentiality of the interviews,
not
that we do not air the interview portion.
That's
The
true.
cameras are off during the interview portion.
Right.
so this takes us back to virtual or in person for the interviewees. I believe that we'd probably get a greater chance of full participation if
Sure.
it was virtual.
Okay, so let's
So you-
hold that thought to go
Could
back
you-
to,
Could you try to schedule them on the 9th? And if they can't make it in person, then default, can they make it virtually on the 9th?
That's a good one.
So it'd be like a hybrid to accommodate all.
so point of just clarification, I know staff, even though the practice of the LAGO committee during interviews has been cameras off during the interviews, we also have the opportunity to keep cameras on. So that is going to be another area that we need to come to a consensus with as we do come into these interviews. And maybe that's a question we need to ask ourselves right now, because I think that'll help gauge how we move forward with an alternate date. Do you have any insight or input? No? Okay, thought I saw it, sorry. Commissioner Gershenson.
Well, I've always been a big advocate of cameras off. And the reason is because in the past, there have been commissioners that have interviewed and kind of looked for difficult, uncomfortable questions. And I think several of the candidates, when they come, they're nervous anyway, even though there's nothing to be nervous about with us, but there are other factors. There are people that do thrive on using information in a negative way, and with social media, I have always favored cameras off.
Yeah. Commissioners, any other thoughts? Commissioner Jackson.
And I have to say, I concur with that, especially with this appointment, because it is also, causing a little bit of consternation.
Sure,
So
sure.
I think we should stick with our camera.
I also agree, Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Gershenson. At the same time, I do want to say that members of the public are able to attend in person, and with attending in person, they will also be privy. We're not hiding the interviews from the public. It's just to preserve essentially what Commissioner Gershenson has pointed out. So while it sounds like we will move forward with interviews being off camera, I want to make a point to say that members of the public are more than welcome to join the committee in person and being part of all of the applicant interviews. So it sounds like the committee would like to move forward with having the cameras turned off during the individual applicant interviews. with now that being said, as we move into the alternate date and time, commissioners, where do we fall within that?
Do we need an alternate date and time if we're offering a hybrid?
It's a good question. Where do we fall, committee members?
Well, Pam, when are you gonna be making the calls? So you make the calls soon?
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll know in a couple days,
And we can,
and maybe we can make a decision.
maybe it won't even be a decision.
So should we move forward with the in-person interviews on the 9th and then?
Well, hybrid, we're gonna offer a hybrid.
So
Is that what I-
do go-to, or they can do in-person to accommodate that date and time.
Well, is your preference that they be in person, and then if it's just.
That's where I need a little bit of clarification at, I guess.
If they're not able to come in, that's when you offer that as an
Yeah,
alternative.
yes, good clarification, yeah.
Okay. So I want to make sure my notes
Yeah.
follow everything here. So we're going to be looking to move the August 9th Lago meeting to 8:30 a.m. Interviews to be held in person. Maybe if someone cannot make it in person, there
Yeah.
might be
Yes.
accommodations. Considering alternate days, but we haven't settled on one because we're waiting to see how the 9th goes. And then I want to make sure I've got our names correct. For city, we have Benson and Stevens. For township, we have Campbell. And then for public, we have Duffy, Brown, Levine, and Manna.
Correct. All right, so commissioners, with that being said, it looks like we are aiming for in-person interviews on August 9th at an 8:30 a.m. Lago meeting. The idea is to emphasize in person, but if there are applicants who are unable to attend in person on August 9th, we will provide an alternate date with the option of either in-person or an online interview. Did I capture that correctly?
Alternate date or virtual on the 9th. Sometimes they're not available in person, but they can be available remotely.
Okay,
So
great
that-
point out. So commissioners, are we okay with an applicant not able to attend in person on the 9th and offer that hybrid option to interview virtually on the 9th?
Yes.
Are we okay with that? So, just as a clarification, thank you, Pam. We're moving forward with in-person interviews on August 9th. If an applicant is unable to attend in person on the 9th, they will have the opportunity to do an online virtual interview. What I think is probably best moving forward today is first figuring out potentially, are all the applicants available on the 9th? And if they are, amazing, great, we're good to go. I think we'll be able to get more information by Friday, maybe even sooner than Friday this week if there's applicants that can't be available on the 9th period. Because I would hate to spend more time trying to find an alternate date and time if in fact we don't need that alternate date and time.
Right.
So at this time, let's move forward with in-person interviews taking place on the 9th. And if an applicant is unable to attend in person, we will offer that virtual option to interview on the 9th during committee as well. Are we all on the same page and in agreement moving forward with that?
Sounds good.
Okay, so with that being said, do we have a motion to bring forward Mr. Jeffrey Campbell of Township Official, both Eric Tungate, or I'm sorry, Drew Benson and Kalfani Stevens under the city officials, and then under the general public to bring forward to interview, we have Kathleen Duffy, Margaret Brown, George Levine, and Martin Manna. So do we have a motion to bring those individuals forward for interview on August 9th? Motion by Commissioner Lubes, support by Commissioner Gershenson. Can we do a prompt? Do we do prompt the vote? Let's do a prompt the vote, please.
John, do you try to group them, like do the two cities together? Does it matter? Or,
Yeah,
I
5
just
0.
give them a time slot.
5 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. Alrighty, Commissioners, looking that is our last item under the regular agenda, I'd now like to move down to item number 9, which moves us to our second public comment. And as a reminder, this can be for items on the agenda or items off the agenda. So at this time, if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak, please make your way to the end of the table. Good morning.
Morning. Ross Baranco, Novi. Again, I just wanted to clarify that 21 commissioners have been asked the question as to cite the authority that the commission has to create the land bank. And 21 commissioners in 7 days have not been able to supply an answer or have not given an answer. So all of this just transpired about the candidates and everything may be an unconstitutional de facto entity that's been created by the commission unless the commission can cite where its authority to create this entity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak during this time of our second public comment? Seeing none, I will close our second public comments. Commissioners, is there any further business to come before us this morning? Alrighty, without objection, I declare the meeting over at 10:29 a.m. Thank you, everyone.
thank you.